Linh Dinh eating fried chicken. I hate to admit this, brother, but there are times when I'm eating fried chicken when I think about nothing else but eating fried chicken. When I utterly forget about my family, honor, and country, the various blood debts you owe me, my past humiliations and my future crimes, everything, in short, but the crispy skin on my fried chicken. But I'm not altogether evil. There are also times when I would refuse to lick or swallow anything that's not generally available to mankind, which is, when you think about it, absolutely nothing at all. And no doubt that's why apples can cause riots, and meat brings humiliation, and each gasp of air will fill one's lungs with gunpowder and smoke.
I we have growing up there's like a specialty kind of grocery store, and the day old fried chicken would be like packaged up and on sale. And I just like without I don't know, my dad always stocks up on the day old fried chicken, and he still to this day he brings it home from the grocery store as like a treat. Like he always brings home day old fried chicken.
I mean, it's good. It's hard to explain. Fried chicken is good. There's probably like a hominess to it, something that's like familiar about it, comfortable about it. Someone was talking about this the other day. Meat is something we eat it. We get excited about. We get excited about eating it, right? We don't get excited about eating potatoes or vegetables.
Yeah.
But meat, we get stoked about eating. Potatoes. What do you say? Potatoes, broccoli, and meatloaf. Giggly potatoes. No one cares. But you add the potatoes, take the broccoli away. No one cares. But you put the broccoli back and take away the meatloaf, then people care.
I think fried chicken is a very American symbol. Like, I don't know, it's like an American stereotype that people love, like fried chicken and stuff like that. But also, I feel like the United States eats a lot of meat, or red meat especially, compared to the rest of the world.
This belief that Americans eat more meat than other countries is backed up by the data. As you can see here, America consumes more beef than any other country and is fourth in per capita consumption, only behind Uruguay, Argentina, and Hong Kong. And America actually eats the most meat total per capita per year, not just beef. So this is sort of a common stereotype, but it's also kind of true.
I think that it's kind of this guy's like guilty pleasure. Like I feel like he's like kind of using it as a way to like kind of avoid what's going on in his life. Like when he's talking about how he's like forgetting about his family, home, and country. You're having a meal and like the food is just so good that like you just kind of get like enveloped in it fully, and you just don't really think about anything else. So it's kind of like a way to get away.
I think it's interesting how there's like the standalone like line, which is, when you think about it, absolutely nothing at all. Just kind of has a power, just sitting there on its own.
Saying the line on its own is in parentheses, because putting a line on its own, like, it's serving the same purpose. Like if you could either put a line in parentheses or you could put it on its own. Either way, it's isolating it. So somehow that's like double isolating that.
It definitely creates a rhythm to the poem. Like you get when, and also at the end there's and. Kind of just him thinking, talking to a brother. I guess remembering, like he's remembering things that have happened in America.
But I think what's interesting is that those lines they don't stand alone. Like that's not its own stanza, the when. It's mixed in, so it is supposed to stand out in that way. And the same thing at the end. There's three ands, and then it doesn't end on an and. So somehow they're still supposed to stand out amongst other lines within the same, stanza.
And then he goes, and each gasp of air will fill one's lungs with gunpowder and smoke. So he's kind of like building up to that last and then that last and is just like it's like a wipeout line. Like you end the poem on that line, you're just like, wow, like that's kind of crazy.
And so the next mention of food in this poem is that of an apple in the last stanza. And really, I think an apple tends to symbolize America in a lot of ways, right? But it's also this sort of delicious treat similar to fried chicken, but it is, of course, a little bit different in that sense. It's not quite fried chicken, but there certainly is a meaning behind it, and it's interesting to look at the other food that is mentioned in this poem.
I'm thinking one thing about apples is they're sweet until they rot and then they're really sour. So maybe it's referencing like kind of like the two faces of American society. Like I don't know, like maybe because like when you on the surface it looks like America's all this great country, right? But then you actually get there and you realize like they treat people like crap sometimes. Like policies are not in place that need to be that like policies are in place that shouldn't be in place. Like stuff like that. Like even though it looks like America's like nice on the outside, it can cause riots because like it's not always how it's supposed to be.
I mean, an apple in a way is a seed for a tree, or is a means of a seed for a tree. So maybe the apple can represent the seeds of something else, like the seeds of a new country or the seeds of war.
Shiny red apples and apple pie, like very American symbols, but they're also a luxury that isn't available everywhere. And I kind of interpreted the riots as inequality, I guess. That's American wealth, while the rest of the world doesn't have, like, is America's profiting off of their labor.
I think that when he's referencing in meat brings humiliation, I think he's thinking about when you eat fried chicken, right, there's the meat and then there's the skin. And so earlier in the poem, he talked about the skin, talking about how he said everything in short, but the crispy skin on my fried chicken. So I think when he's saying everything, he's talking about the meat because it's everything except the skin on the fried chicken. So now he's referencing the meat again. And I think that like it could also go to show that fried chicken has like a layer around it, which is kind of like the layer it portrays, like, right? Like when you see fried chicken, you see like like the crispy skin. And then once you actually bite into it, you get the meat. And so I think maybe he's trying to reference like another thing about America. Like America looks all great, but when you actually get there and you realize it's not like what it always seems to be. And so maybe as a guy from Vietnam, which he is, like he's kind of like going through this process when he kind of realizes like he moved to America because he thought it'd be like great for his career and all that. And he's kind of realizing maybe it's not what it seemed to be. I think it could definitely be like true that like apples and like fried chicken are basically like polar opposites in terms of like what they do for you, but at the same time, like I think most people would agree that fried chicken tastes better. So I think that maybe he's kind of using that like to say, I don't know, like just because one tastes better doesn't mean it's better for you, and that can be applied to a lot of things in America.
This duality can also be applied to immigrating and moving to America, because if you think about a lot of places have this belief that America is sort of the best way to live, or is, has this great international reputation. But in reality, just like the fried chicken, it may not really be the healthiest or best decision. And you could also draw parallels with this to the idea of the American dream.
I think through context clues, I feel like the poet is Vietnamese, and the history of the United States and Vietnam is, very bloody, and I think as a Vietnamese American, you have to reckon with the blood debts of the American legacy in Vietnam, and yeah, humiliation and gunpowder and smoke, like those are phrases that evoke the Vietnam War and the complex history.
Was growing. Voices of those objecting to U.S. involvement in Vietnam were getting louder. In May of 1970, 4 students were killed by National Guard troops during a campus protest at Kent State University in Ohio.
This sort of ties into the first interpretation of this line about apples causing riots, right? Maybe school is the apple and riots is anti-Vietnam protests, which were very common throughout the United States, and this is probably just the most famous example. The other interpretation of this line is that apples is actually America and riots is really the Vietnam War itself and other proxy wars that the US has fought. I really think it's important to understand that the Vietnam War was really devastating for the country of Vietnam, even though they had North Vietnam had won. At what cost? There was terrible poverty, of mass immigration out of Vietnam after the war, And really just, it was bad for all sides, not just South Vietnam, who ended up losing the war. So would it help you to know that he was born in Saigon, Vietnam?
Oh yeah, that I think that fits perfectly. Like I think, talking about like the wars of Vietnam, like it's obviously pretty catastrophic for people from Vietnam. This guy probably is like right around the age when he was like in his teenage years when like a lot of the wars were going on, and so I think that this is probably like a way for him to kind of cope with like what he kind of went through, and also like he's talking about how like I think when a Vietnam person like comes to America, they try to enjoy it, but it's hard for them because they know like deep down that they shouldn't be enjoying it. And I think that he's kind of like going through that struggle because it seems like he's probably a poet in America now, and he's like living in America, you know, assimilating into the American culture, and he's like realizes what he's doing is not necessarily the right thing to do, and it's kind of going against like his moral beliefs and what his like country stands for. So he's kind of like dealing with that by writing about something that's really easy to write about, which is fried chicken, because it's just I feel like it could be someone that I don't know if it necessarily has to be his brother, but I think it would be like a close friend back in Vietnam, where he's like kind of voicing how like I'm sure when he came to America, most people didn't really like hear from him that much. It's not easy to talk to someone across the world, so I'm guessing he's like kind of like talking about how like maybe he feels like he let them down by kind of like I don't know, becoming like sort of an American. Like he feels like he's betraying like everything he used to stand for, and so when he says like I hate to admit this, like he's like basically prefacing the whole like poem. Like I feel like this whole poem is kind of like a note to whoever this brother is. So I feel like he's like prefacing this note by like basically telling the guy like, this is like, you know what I mean, this is not gonna be like good news. Like I kind of like let you down, and I'm sorry.
I still think it represents America and kind of the juxtaposition between two identities. The poet as someone who's not or who's like partially American, being taken in by American culture, I guess, while still struggling to maintain their own identity. Like fried chicken is just like an allure of America, I guess, like a representation of American avarice.